This year has been tougher than most. Our government has been in an all-out culture war with the trans community, and the Murdoch-owned press are just fanning and often contributing to the flames. On the 20th of December 2021, gender-critical lawyer Akua Reindorf was named the Commissioner of the EHRC, along with receiving a seat as a board member by Liz Truss. On the 26th of January, the EHRC released dual statements opposing the removal of administrative barriers for trans people to receive legal recognition in Scotland, and asking that England and Wales' ban on conversion therapy not include trans people. On the 10th of February, Vice News reported that it had been leaked sections of an unpublished EHRC guidance pack dating to late 2021, which advised businesses and organisations to exclude transgender people from single-sex spaces. This is including toilets, hospital wards and changing rooms, unless they held a gender recognition certificate. Just 1% of trans people in the UK currently hold a gender recognition certificate. In March, a bill was formally introduced in the Scottish Parliament, which would reform the Gender Recognition Act, implemented by Parliament of the United Kingdom in 2004. If enacted, this bill would make it easier for trans people in Scotland to change their legal recognised gender by changing the process of applying for a gender recognition certificate. On the 31st of March, a Downing Street briefing paper that was leaked to ITV News showed that the government had planned to drop the proposed legislation banning conversion therapy, following an announcement that ministers would explore non-legislative methods of handling the practice. The legislation would have included a ban on conversion therapy for transgender people. In response, at least 120 LGBT groups pulled out of the UK's planned first ever Safe to Be Me conference on LGBT issues, and tens of thousands protested from London to Brighton and even here in Reading. In June, a YouGov poll found an overall gradual erosion in support towards transgender rights. This drop in support has not happened in a vacuum, with many LGBT+ right advocates pointing to the sustained efforts by politicians and the press to stoke fear and anger towards trans people. Conservative UK Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries met with the heads of UK sporting bodies and told them that elite and competitive women's sport must be reserved for people born of the female sex. On the 6th of July, when gay MP Peter Gibson resigned as Parliamentary Private Secretary in the Department for International Trade in protest at Boris Johnson's conduct in the Chris Pincher scandal, his recognition letter expressed disappointment about the damage our party had inflicted on itself over the failure to include trans people in the ban on conversion therapy. Fellow gay MP and PPS Mike Freer mentioned in his resignation letter that he felt the government was creating an atmosphere of hostility for LGBT+ people. In July, Pink News reported that MP Joanna Cherry, who is a fan of anti-trans lobby group LGB Alliance and an associate of J.K. Rowling, had been elected chair of the Joint Committee on Human Rights. The British Triathlon issued a blanket policy banning any athletes not assigned female at birth above the age of 12 from competing, instead requiring them to compete in a newly announced open category. This was a reversal of an earlier 2018 policy which allowed for trans inclusion once certain hormonal prerequisites had been met. Later that same month, both the Rugby Football League and the Rugby Football Union implemented similar bans. Both organisations described this as a precautionary approach. In August, Attorney General Suella Braverman opined that it is unlawful for schools to misgender, dead name, ban from some sports, reject from enrolment based on their trans status, and refuse any and all other forms of gender affirmation to trans children, and that to recognise their identity as trans would qualify as indoctrinating children. A statement was issued by the Ministry of Justice under Dominic Raab that trans prisoners would be sent to prisons based on their genitalia. In October, the Home Office reported that between 2021 and 2022, hate crimes against trans people had increased by 56%, which has been linked to the growing hostility towards trans people on social media. On the 22nd of September, plans to allow people to officially change gender without a medical diagnosis were not adopted by Liz Truss's government, which is instead cutting the cost of applying for a gender recognition certificate as part of moves to revamp the process. On the 27th of September, Sussex Police were forced to issue an apology by Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who accused them of playing identity politics and denying biology, telling them to focus on catching criminals rather than policing pronouns, for its reporting on sexual offences committed by a transgender woman prior to her transition. Just 19 days before this vigil, on the 1st of November, The Telegraph reported that the latest Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is planning to revise the 2010 Equality Act in a way that would impact legal protections for transgender people from discrimination in the UK. After this year of hell, we're lucky that only 7 people were lost to suicide here in the UK, but not even one person is okay. We stand with Reading, together, as one community. Love will always unite us against the hate, and remember, we are all more than LGBT.